and welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today I'm joined by Chrissy Hansen, as well as Jay Bundy from the channel Pocket Locker 86. Links in the description for the channel. We'll talk about that again more.
Thank you.
And Dr. Bob, who is, well, you were on recently, but besides that, it's been a while since we've had you on. But yeah, you were on one time recently. But the point of this discussion is to clear the air on some things. So about 8 months ago, you know, Dr. Bob was on a podcast with Doug from Pine Creek, and some things were said, and a lot of people were hurt by some of the things that you said, Dr. Bob. And so I just wanted to give you I wanted to start off by giving you the floor, Dr. Bob, and you can do whatever you want, clear the air, apologize or not apologize. I want to give you a chance to clear the air, and then we'll have a discussion about this. So, Dr. Bob, the floor is yours.
Yeah, the canceled business that I experienced, that really doesn't and didn't bother. I'm doing my own thing in any event, so I'm not really emotionally or professionally dependent on any particular channel of exposure I have. But the thing that does bother me and has bothered me about this is the fact, as I see it, that things I said were misconstrued, and I'm still not quite sure why, except that I know some people are just sensitive to any buzzwords or whatever coming up, and it's as if you used a curse word and turned them off. But somehow I was perceived as being anti-women, anti-gay, anti-trans, racist. Well, all these things I despise, and I always have, as anybody that is familiar with my various crazy rings and all that ought to know. So obviously, somehow, I have said things that wounded and offended people. I didn't mean to do that, and so I am quite happy to ask their forgiveness for that. I try to minimize any kind of conflict or offense with people. I somehow didn't do it then, and so I owe an apology for that. But excuse me, the real tragedy of a thing like that is not that I feel insulted, because I didn't. I don't. I've got a thicker skin than that. Or maybe it's just fat. I don't know. But the problem is that you don't get any chance to mutually understand one another if the mere occurrence of certain words and topics even throw up a wall. Oh, I don't need to hear any more of that. And as if I were to say, oh, what's this? Somebody is a communist. Well, that's the end of that. Because in fact, it's the old cliche, some of my best friends are commies, and I'm not kidding. I am enthused about friendships and dialogue with people from all different perspectives, Muslims, fundamentalists, Christians, Satanists, communists, Moonies. I count people from all these perspectives as friends, gays, straights, whatever, transgender. It doesn't matter to me, except that I look for relationships and friendships with people that are different from me, whether I agree or disagree, whether I'm like or unlike them. I feel like the way I can learn about people and issues is by
You're breaking up. You're breaking up really bad. Are you plugged into Wi-Fi, or do you have are you plugged in directly? You're breaking up really bad.
Yeah, I'm sure about it.
It's like hard to understand anything you're saying.
It is.
Yeah. Maybe try restart. Maybe try refreshing the page. But I do want to stop. I want to cut. I want to jump in and ask you. It's just a simple question. If you're there, I don't know if you're there or not.
Oh, gee,
Try joining again.
Dr.
All right.
Bob and become robot.
Yeah, Dr. Robotnik. Yeah, I don't know what you guys thought about that. I do want to ask him if he's sorry for hurting people's feelings because that's kind of what this is about. And it wasn't. Here he is, Dr. Bob. I just have a question I want to ask. Oh, it's already glitching before I even got him on here. Are you there?
just go get out and come back in.
Yeah, if you could do that. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna have to kick him out for a second. So, you guys, there he is. All right, Dr. Bob. I just want to ask you a question, just straight up to the point. You said some things. I'm not asking you to necessarily take back what you said or like change your thoughts or be a thought police on you. But it's a simple thing. Is some things that you said hurt some people's feelings.
Hmm.
Do you feel sorry for the people? Do you feel sorry for that, or I just
Oh
want to
yeah, I always try to avoid hurtful words. I carefully parse what I'm going to say, so because I don't want to be misunderstood and I don't want to be offensive to anyone, especially if I happen to disagree with them. Because if you don't approach issues with friendly dialogue and sincere curiosity to understand the other person, what's the point? That is my approach. Obviously, didn't come across that way to people, and then in that case, I have failed to communicate, and I certainly apologize for that.
We have a super chat from a friend of the channel, Kesha White. Is Bob sorry?
Oh yeah, yeah. I really want to get along with people and to be correctly understood that I am for just about everybody. I don't write anybody off.
Anyone else want to ask any questions?
Sure. So, Bob, I really appreciate you doing this because we don't often get to have these conversations, and I'm thankful to Neil for reaching out to myself and Chrissy and giving us an opportunity to participate in the conversation as well. I guess for starters, I think it means something to me that you're expressing an intent not to hurt people. To be honest, I think you were on that panel with Doug, and Doug makes a lot of content about some of those same controversial issues. He seems to be well aware that his stances and his content hurt people, and he does not seem to care. He seems to enjoy that. Like it's all for his entertainment, and you know, people should be more dead inside or whatever. And I think one of the distinctions that I've seen between you and Doug, right, is that I don't think you express your opinions with the intention to hurt people. And so I think intention matters in that regard. At the same time, I think a lot of people would be more than happy to you know, move past this and continue supporting you as a scholar and, you know, the role you play in the content in our community. But I do think some of the things you said were really problematic. And I think that, you know, probably people would want to be convinced that you understand the problems with what you said rather than just feeling bad that what you said hurt people.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's good thinking. Yeah, I'd like to know, you know, what the heck it sounds like I'm saying, and
Sure.
the issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll let Chrissy get in here before I get back to that, because you know I don't want to dominate the conversation.
No, I'm glad that you were able to come off and you're trying to understand. Because I mean, doctor, I want to say this as I guess I'm going to come off like Dr. Bob's attorney right now, but whatever it is, this is how I honestly feel. You're from a generation. I mean, I'm not going to say how old, I'm not going to tell your age out there, but
I think
you're
I'm 68.
yeah. So you come from and I'm not saying that's like an excuse to like, just say whatever you want, but like you are a lot older than us and a lot of things have changed in just the last 10, 20 years alone, especially even in the last 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of different new norms now. People are adjusting to change, and I think for the better. And you might not see that right now because you grew up in a different time period than us, but that's just the reality right now. And so I'm not that surprised that certain things like this are going to happen. And I really hope that there can be some education on both sides in this thing. Chrissy, please ask if you have anything you want to say. Chrissy, please.
Sure. So, Dr. Bob, hi.
Hey.
It's been a long time since you and I talked.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Yeah, for those that aren't aware, Dr. Bob is actually the person that gave me my first go-to on the first article I ever published.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, you invited me to the Journal of Higher Criticism right after you and I did a stream together on MythVision, early MythVision.
You hadn't published anything before then?
No, that was my first time.
Well, I hope it's a continuing thing. I missed your presence.
It is actually. I'm now up to my 15th peer-reviewed article.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, you basically launched my my career, as it were, in biblical studies, and it was been very exciting, and it was watching this situation play out because I wasn't really part of the whole canceling situation that happened last year. It actually, for me, it was actually during the whole Flashing Swords crisis that happened in I think it was 2020. And so that was a really interesting situation. So for those that don't know what ended up, at least from my perspective, what happened was, at the time Dr. Bob was editing a bunch of things. I was actually supposed to be in the Varieties of Jesus Mythicism book at the time. I had written a chapter on the history of mythicism for that. And then Dr. Bob's Flashing Swords book was being released, and it was an anthology of short stories, and Dr. Bob had written an introduction for it, and the introduction had, for a lot of reasons that I found very problematic, different political things in there that I just could not agree with at all. Things that were very easily read as less than charitable, we'll say. And a lot of other authors agreed with that, and it led to a whole situation where a ton of authors were pulling their chapters. I initially was going to pull my chapter, and then I tried getting in touch with you about it and having a conversation. I sent an email, and I still actually have it. Actually, you sent me an email saying that you sent me an email because you knew that I was upset about it, and I was considering pulling my chapter. And then I responded with a bit of a discussion on why I found things problematic and why I was considering that. And then you just never responded to me.
Was this something you didn't have any contribution to Flashing Swords, though, right?
No. This was on the. It was because of the Flashing Swords situation, and so I decided, because you didn't respond to me over email, I waited it out. The reason I was upset was because a lot of the things that you were saying were particularly hitting me. At that time, I was actually just coming out to people as trans, and that summer I actually ended up suffering death threats over it. So when your stuff came out too, and then it was also like, at least from my perspective, rather problematic, it hit really hard So I sent the email. I tried to talk to you, and you never responded to me. And so I decided to
I
wait.
have no recollection of that. I'll hunt for the email. Could you
Yeah.
resend it?
I've still got it here.
Oh boy, great. If you
But what ended up happening is then you did a video that you put on your channel where you tried explaining things, and there were a lot of other things in there that got a little worse. You compared being transgender to having a body dysmorphic disorder where we lob off body parts and stuff. And things that just are not actually what are even remotely what's the case actually according to psychologists. And that coupled with no response to my email over a week, I pulled my chapter.
I'm so sorry about that. I wouldn't have. I wondered how I lost it or something. I certainly would have responded had I realized you'd emailed it. So I'd love to read it.
Hey, let me ask you this, and I'm glad that you just apologized, Dr. Bob. That's really I was very happy just to hear that just now. That was great. I didn't know how you were going to respond to that, and I was surprised that you. Thank you for that. Let me just ask you a question though. You used to teach a long time ago before a lot of these changes went down in society, and let's just say you're teaching today, Professor Bob Price at Boston University, and let's just say that you have a student whose name is John. About a month into this semester, John transitions and changes to Jeanette. I don't know, just an example. What are you going to do? What are you going to call that? What are you going to call that student when you call on that student in the class? I just want to
Jeanette.
I mean, I think it's just certain things that people are asking for are just very simple. No one's like putting a gun to anyone's head and saying that, you need to change your life or, that's my 2 cents. Let me give it over to someone else. Chrissy, if you want to.
Yeah. So like, the reason why I've been really skeptical since then as well is like in your live stream with Doug, you made some comments like no one's going to force me to use the pronouns they want. People are not going to force me to use Caitlyn Jenner's name. And then you consistently were using their dead name, Bruce, instead.
I always have referred to her as Caitlyn.
In the live stream you weren't, though.
I wonder if that's somehow misconstrued, because I have never, like I made a point like what's his name in Canada makes that I won't change I won't go out of the way and say them for an individual, for instance, but something about people's preferred names, I would have no problem with that and never have.
This is actually an interesting point on they them for singular individuals. Like, why wouldn't you use that for a singular individual?
Well, sometimes you do anyway without regard to this whole debate when you're saying someone and it's not clear and you wind up saying they. But I resist having a speech code imposed upon me. Which is a bit different than haggling over somebody's name. I mean, I go along with how they identify. I take each individual as they come. I'm just not going to change my grammar because somebody would prefer that I did. I don't want to be, to me, that's manipulation. But it's not that and whatever they want is fine with me. It's just that I don't feel I have to be obliged to adopt linguistic forms that I don't buy. Just, here's the latest thing, you better do it. No, you're not telling me what to say.
So why don't you buy this linguistic form?
It just seems ungrammatical. And here's where I probably has something to do with my age, but I'm an editor and a grammar nut. I like to keep things straight as I have always seen them. I hesitate to even end a sentence with a preposition or to split an infinitive. So I guess it just seems to me that I don't want to change. I don't want to adopt new speak, so to speak, because some regime says so. But that has nothing to do with people's personal names or any preference they have in conversation to them or about them.
So this is why I find this one really interesting, actually, specifically from a grammar standpoint. Linguistically and historically, we can actually confirm that people have been using they, them as a gender-neutral pronoun for individuals authentically since the 13th century. It is actually a consistent feature of the English language. And the reason that it's been usually not accepted in like textbooks and stuff is because later on what ended up happening is that he, him was essentially took over as the singular neutral gender pronoun. In addition to also being the masculine one, it ended up doubling over. What has essentially happened is basically that we've just reverted to the way that English used to be.
Interesting, because I went for him or her, or his or her. I figured that was probably the way to go, but
let me jump in for 1 second, because I heard Dr. Bob, you said something about on an individual basis, I have no problem changing pronouns for people. But you said, like, on a grand scale, you're not gonna. This is my grammar. No one's gonna make. If I'm not, but like, correct me if I'm wrong. Anyone on the panel, but I don't think anyone's making people change their overall. It's always been about individuals. It's always been about situations. Every situation we come across, you meet someone who might go by ma'am, Mrs., Miss. This is the same thing as that. Yes. I don't think this is all individualism to begin with. So with that being said, I mean, I don't even know if there's even really an issue other than a misunderstanding of how we're going about it.
Yeah,
Jordan Peterson took this to court when he was going to be fired for not using whatever the required lingo was. So I think it does happen.
He went to court over Bill C-16. Guess how many people went to jail for Bill C-16? Guess how many? 0. Bill C-16 is only for hate speech. It's not saying that if you accidentally one day said he and for a she, cops are gonna come and lock you up. Nobody ever said that. If you actually read Bill C-16, it's for extreme cases. Like, for example, a teacher in a university has a student and they go out of their way to wrongly say they're like being harsh about it. That's what
that's absurd. Yeah, they shouldn't do that. I mean, that's
There we go.
And that's basically where people like Jordan Peterson in particular, there's a reason that he's actually currently being investigated for psychological malpractice and other things. It's specifically because he doesn't he's not even contributing to the field anymore. And so fellow professors who would sit in on his classes would note how he would essentially pass off non-researched opinions as fact to his students and things like that. Jordan Peterson essentially created a huge scare over the Bill C-16 and other things like that. That just wasn't the case. In fact, like, no one was getting fired over misgendering someone, as we call it, or by like using the wrong pronouns or anything like that. That was never the case. And like, I always understand when people, for the most part, I always understand when people make a mistake like that. For instance, this last year I came out to my grandmother's, and my eldest grandmother is 86. And she's really trying, but it's really hard. And she dead names me. She uses the wrong pronouns on occasion and stuff. And it's fine. I understand. She's gone 26 years of me having a very specific name and pronouns.
Okay.
Well, let me throw something that might make sense for like Dr. Bob. I know you're a promoter of the Second Amendment right of protecting yourself with a weapon. Now, imagine if I said to you, you have a firearm, and you said, yes, I have a firearm, and it's legal, and I'm protected under the Second Amendment. And I say to you, but someone in your house is going to take the gun and shoot somebody and kill somebody. And I'm just like trying to give you the worst scenario ever to try to scare you. And you're just, you're thinking to yourself, that scenario is not going to happen. Just think about that. And as far as these other things that you hear from people like Jordan Peterson, oh, they're going to make everybody talk a certain way. It's going to be Orwellian. Like, he's going to the extreme level. That's not reality. It's not happening.
So he's like making the exception into the rule.
Basically,
100%.
yes.
Uh-huh.
And like with most people like me who are trans, the most we just want out of this world is to be able to just be respected, have our names and pronouns respected, and like be able to use the bathroom without being harassed. Like that's basically all we want. It's the bar at this point, because what's ended up happening is because of people like Peterson. There's been such a scare about people like me that there are states that would, if I lived in them, deny me medical care. They just passed a law in one state that would give EMTs and others the ability to reject me medical care based on what genitals I have.
What is the possible rationale for something like that?
Because I'm not fitting into what they're wanting. What's ended up happening is that people like Peterson have essentially just aligned themselves with a really fundamentalist, far-right Christian approach to everything. And when we've picked up that rhetoric, like, I'm not going to be silenced into using people's pronouns and stuff like that, it's furthering a message that people like Peterson have been essentially pushing to further attack people like me. Like, there's so many places now, like states, where if I went there, I might not be able to get the care I need to actually like treat things like my gender dysphoria, because since I'm trans and I have gender dysphoria, which essentially means that I have things that make it extremely hard for me to live being perceived as male. It causes psychological trauma. And so getting treatment for that, like hormone therapy, and eventually like breast implants and things like that, are they're medical necessities for my psychological state. And in several states, I could potentially just be denied those outright now. And that's what people like Peterson have been supporting. Peterson has come out in favor of these. And it's something that's been going on across a lot of the right wing now. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Donald Trump, so many others have all been stating how much they want to go after people like me. They banned books from schools for just talking about gay people existing or being. Wow. That's what's happening now. There was orders in Florida just recently to essentially just start eradicating libraries in schools and purging them of anything that mentions LGBTQ people.
Sheesh, I had not heard anything, quite that far. The way I have heard it, and I'm far from thinking that anything you hear in the media is to be believed. I've heard it represented as an attempt to encourage kids that are too young to really make responsible decisions, to sort of push them into this. Now, if that's happening, I think that's unwise, but that's the only way I've ever heard it. I mean, you obviously know more about this than I do, so I'm not challenging.
No one's trying to push this on kids or anything. Like, I personally would never want to push what I go through on anyone. Like the reality of the situation is that transgender people make up less than 2% of the population of the country. We are extremely tiny, and it's really telling how much that people like Peterson and other right-wing proponents decided to spin this narrative that we're trying to push this on kids, when all we've asked for is that we teach people to just respect us. And so like when they're talking about things getting pushed on kids, the most it is maybe like they read from a storybook about gay people being married and having a family. And that's not pushing this on kids. That's just showing that there's other kinds of lives. There's other people who live other lives other than mom and dad.
Yeah, I had my mind made up on that one nearly 30 years ago when I saw for the first time in years an old friend of mine from junior high, a real good friend who I thought was probably gay, and he in the meantime had come out as gay and married another man, and they had adopted a cute little kid from Bolivia and were about to adopt another one. They invited me and my two daughters and my wife over for dinner once, and I of course readily went, and I thought forever after, these people are like Ward and June Cleaver. I mean, there's nothing weird going on here. And so I have always suspected and rejected the idea that gay marriage was somehow perverse. And so it often takes, meeting the people in the flesh to really get a handle on what the issue is. And I had gotten a different impression from the discussions I've heard, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand, because I came from a really far right Christian background. My parents weren't like that, and actually my grandfather on my dad's side was gay, actually. But I didn't know that growing up. I didn't know anything about it growing up, and I grew up in a far right Christian environment, and so all the stuff I was exposed to was essentially a lot of the things that I'm assuming a lot of things that you've been exposed to, like Jordan Peterson stuff and stuff like those discussions about how there's like this attempt to push these things on kids and stuff in schools and things like that. And it's when I finally started talking to other trans people and entered the LGBT community in more depth, it's like, no. Like the most I've ever seen anything happen is that there's been occasional like fun time events where they have a drag queen come and just read stories at schools with kids, and it's a drag queen. Like, statistically speaking, gay people and like drag queens and stuff are safer to be around children than most straight men are. Statistically, like, this has been proven repeatedly since the 90s, that straight men are, specifically straight men who are close to the family, are more dangerous to children than a random gay person would ever.
To me, it's no different than having like a Buffalo Bills cheerleader come into school and, like, how they're like dressed real, like, nobody got offended by that. Like, that's just my. And by the way, there's a really good question. I don't mean to cut you. Where'd we go?
Dr. Bob disappeared.
I'll probably be back. I was going to ask. This was a good question. Does he understand why people were offended? I mean, I think this is the crux of the thing. Then I want to let you get some questions in, Jay, as well.
No, you're good. I just think that's what we're working here. Maybe in the meantime, Neil, you can tell people like why we're here, like why you wanted to sit down with them.
Some people are probably wondering what's going on. I don't even know.
Exactly.
About 8 months ago, right around there, Dr. Bob was in a podcast with someone else, and they were talking, and they were saying some things that were seen as very offensive by people. They were offensive, and they didn't. I don't even think they even realized that what they were saying were offensive. And that's why I pulled this question up. Do they even understand? And so some of the stuff that was being said, like for example, when they were talking about the riots in certain cities from Black Lives Matter, and what do you think should be done about the riots? Dr. Bob said they should all be shot down. I'm like, whoa, that's a little intense. And then there was other things being said,
Yeah.
like trans people only come out because the school,
Has been like
yeah,
uh,
like when they come out,
essentially
get
has
attention.
been like
Yeah.
pushing transness on them as like a fad. And it's
yeah.
like
So people were just like, wow, what am I listening to? And
most of the time a transgender teenager's lucky if they can even use the bathroom in their public school. At least
Yeah.
the one that actually conforms to their gender, and not the one that they.
here he is.
Oh, he's
You
back.
got disconnected, but it's okay, Dr. Bob.
Hey, you're back! Yay!
Now, there's a question, and I'm not skip, and I see the super chats, and I'm gonna get to them. This question is just so perfect, and I don't know why I didn't ask this. Does Dr. Bob understand why people are offended? Do you know why? Like, can you just answer that? Like, I sound like I'm like interrogating. I don't mean to come off as interrogating, but like, it is a good question. Does Bob understand why people were offended? It's just a good question, I think.
Who are you asking?
You, Dr. Bob.
Well, my guess was that when certain topics come up that from somebody you know is from a different perspective, some people have the tendency to like there were things I said that I said things like, I believe that women are superior to men, like Ashley Montague argued. And yet people will read that and say, you're a misogynist. What? I don't understand how they got that. And if I say like some African-American self-appointed leaders appeared to me to be exploiting their flocks, they're not racist. No, I'm trying to, weed out exploiters of the people I am favoring here. So sometimes I think, is it merely bringing up a certain issue that somehow people are taking as a microaggression or something? So I remain kind of confused about that, and I would like to better understand. I mean, that's just my theory as to what's going on.
No,
I'd like to hear more.
I appreciate the honest. If you don't understand why people are offended, that's great. Like, you don't have to like give the right answer just to get out of the situation. Like, let's be real here, right? And so people might be wondering why I'm even doing this. Why does Neil want to why does he want to redeem Dr. Bob after what he said? Well, here I'll straight up answer from the heart. I enjoy having conversations with Dr. Bob on the topics of ancient mythology. I don't bring in Dr. Bob on my channel to hear his politics, to hear who he's going to vote for, to get his opinion on social issues. I don't ever ask him those things. I like having him on because him and I are very similar in the fact that we both come at the text, the ancient but the Bible, with very critical approach. We're both very critical about this stuff, but we also love it. We also are trying to understand it, so we give it a fair shake. And if you watch my channel, I'm not like most atheist channels that are just trying to debunk the situation. I'm actually trying to understand the text. Dr. Bob is the same way, and I look up to him because he's been doing this longer than I've been alive, basically. And a lot of the stuff I learned is from you, and I read a lot of your books, and I really appreciate you in that vein. But I also understand that there are some people who are concerned with your approach to other things. So with that being said, I wanted to bring you on to just have a little education session and try to understand each other, try to clear the air and try to build a bridge again. That's what I'm here for. And so I don't know, maybe I should toss it over to Jay. And Jay, do you have any questions?
So for me, while we'll stick to the same topic for now. Some of the problems that I heard is, as an educator, I am first and foremost an ally to my students. And so the example of a student going through a transition while in my class, is it something where my classroom needs to be a safe space for that student. And if I or anyone else in that class refuses to use the pronoun requested by that student, that's a problem, because now I got a student who's waking up in the morning and they're having unnecessary social anxiety and they're not focused on biology. And so this is a really important issue at universities. And as academics, it's really important that we set an inclusive tone. And so I don't understand why it would be a problem to ask people to go out of their way to use the pronouns that someone asked. The other thing that I'm learning, and we're all learning, right, as we go in life, is I'm learning how serious of an issue this is. As Chrissy was kind enough to share, and as other, trans stories have depicted to me, being called the wrong name, someone using the wrong gender pronouns is a source of denying this person their identity. It is one of the most hurtful things you can do to that person. Now, as a common courtesy and recognizing that, we've all come to age in a world that hasn't fully accepted our queer community, our trans community, our non-binary community, they've learned to take it on the chin a little bit. Okay, if somebody uses the wrong name or uses the wrong pronoun and they didn't mean to, I can roll with it, right? But when they make it really clear, hey, this is what I need you to call me, and then people refuse to, that is, to me, it's an act of it's real weaponized language. It's an incredibly hurtful thing. And so all of us have to let them take the lead on this, because we may never fully understand why something like a pronoun would mean so much to someone, because we don't have the lived experience where that's part of our story. And so at some point we have to understand their stories and understand what's going on right now. And what's going on right now is largely due, at least in America, to the fundamentalist right-wing political ideology and its allegiance to, the fundamentalist religious narratives. They're in the middle of a culture war. And people are fighting every day to take their rights from them, to marginalize them. And those are on the good days where we're not hearing about laws being passed against them or actual terrorist attacks, actual shootings, actual bombs. And so those of us that are just trying to create a harmonious world for everybody to cohabitate as best as we can, we have to understand that this is literally the least we can do. And I'm thankful for you for hearing that out. The other thing I want to quickly mention is I've also been convinced recently that maybe we should try to normalize this. Because if we only talk about pronoun preferences or what to call people when a trans person is around, when a queer person is around, when a non-binary person is around, then they also feel singled out, because all of a sudden everyone does something different when they're here that they would not do if they were not here. So a large part of this conversation needs to be those of us that don't identify as that, picking up the ball and saying, hey, look, I'm going to help normalize this, even amongst cis het people where we have no reason to suspect anybody that's not that is even in the room, because it makes it that much easier for them to be in the room. And thanks for hearing me out.
Well, I just want to underline I have no problem with referring to any individual according to their preference, whether their name or pronouns. It's downright boorish. The height of inconsiderate rudeness to say, "Well, I don't care what you want to be called. I'm calling you this." That I've never accepted. That's just awful. So I've never advocated that kind of nonsense.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was a misunderstanding because I think when we heard you say you would refuse that, I think maybe you were talking about the bigger grammatical thing you cleared up earlier, but I think that's what people may have heard, and that's
bet
why
you're
it
right.
was a problem. That
Yeah.
was a problem for me. Yeah.
I bet
Yeah,
you're right.
that's what a lot of people heard, and a reason why a lot of people hear that is because that specific rhetoric that you picked up there, and that you said you've been like hearing from people like Jordan Peterson, is specifically a rhetoric that's also used by people who adamantly refuse to use our pronouns, no matter what we ask of them. And so, because it's been picked up when that rhetoric gets picked up by people like that and is used, but popularized and oftentimes invented by people like that, and then it's filtered down, and then you use it, it becomes shorthand for people like me, because people like me, people who are trans and who unfortunately have to deal with a lot of Jordan Petersons around us, like it's become essentially a defense mechanism. When we hear that rhetoric, we're like, oh, time to get away.
Yeah, that sums up what I'd begun to think was happening with these the offense taken and given.
Yeah. It becomes, because when when things like that are said, and when they've been especially used in political climates like ours right now that have targeted people like me in various states, at some point we're just we're going to be automatically on the defense when things like that are said, because well, we don't have a reason not to be. And so when you say things like that, it becomes it's part of the general trend we see. Like for instance, I went to a restaurant not too long ago, and the first thing that I heard someone tell me, because I was dressed in women's clothing and everything, like, the first thing they did was throw a slur at me.
That's amazing to me.
That's just my daily lived experience.
Yeah.
As a trans person.
Or
and
if you watch,
so,
okay, dude.
And it's like that for just so many people. So when you repeat rhetoric like this, it automatically gives that impression, and trans people are just automatically going to be on a defensive about that, because otherwise, they run a very potential risk, because when other people use that rhetoric, they do mean malicious things by it.
Well, you pointed out some very helpful distinctions. I appreciate that.
Yeah, if I could just jump in and just say, hopefully I'm seeing this. I'm glad to see, Dr. Bob, you're trying. It seems like you're being receptive to some things that you might not have understood before. And so I'm happy to see that. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, Bob, I also just wanted to mention your influence, right? And why I think that's maybe worked for and against you. So, one, I always say we're fortunate, like I think people are enjoying this conversation. We're lucky to sit down with people who we have different ideas than and actually bring them to light, right? But I think because you're a counter-apologist and a mythicist and sort of a skeptical scholar, right? A lot of times, the expectation is Dr. Price opposes fundamentalist religion and it's, you know, detrimental society on people and what's going on, right? And unfortunately, because the politics and the religion, especially in our cultures, you know, are so tied together, people tend to come out, right? When we're having these conversations, they tend to get in, you know, they tend to sway from politics to religion even at times. And so one of the things I think people have realized, and we're all realizing this in real time, is that because there's so much bigotry that it feels baked into religion, it feels like the counter-apologetics community is a place where people are recovering from religion. It's almost like a safe space to find community again and not just deconstruct, but reconstruct, right? Start to say, okay, I've left that ideas alone. Maybe I'm not part of the religious communities I used to be a part of, but I can't just wander around alone forever, right? And so now people are finding like-minded people on the internet and building community through YouTube and other social media platforms. And so one of the things I noticed is that after you had that conversation with Doug, I think part of the hurt that the community is feeling is it wasn't just you had an uncomfortable conversation with Doug. It was after that, all of a sudden, everybody was having these conversations. And we were getting all sorts of comments on YouTube videos and on other channels where it's almost like it, like Chrissy was saying, it normalized it and it was coming out of the woodworks. And so we were dealing with lots of people who may not have had a genuine misunderstanding, but a lot of times just seemed to. I remember like little things like people, I had dealing with the comment on the follow-up to that stream where somebody was asking, why is it not okay for white people to say the N-word if all the rappers can say it? I mean, these sort of like meme-ified tropes that we shouldn't have to deal with. And so I do think there's an extent to which because people like you, because people like Doug are popular, when you start saying some of these things, even if you don't intend to hurt people, people in our community who have more nefarious intentions see that as a license to sort of become more active in our community. And so now this community where we feel like we're reconstructing our lives away from the bigotry of religion has bigotry invited into it, and the sort of past that people are giving themselves is that it's coming from popular content creators like you or Doug. And I'm just acknowledging that that's not fair to you, but at the same time, it's as you know, it's the consequence of having a pulpit in the community, right? And I just want to make you aware that that's also probably a lot of what people are responding to. And so
well, that's a revelation to me. I wouldn't have thought anybody would seriously take me as legitimation for something like that, or any political or social view.
Sure.
Wow. Yeah, well, I can actually tell you that they definitely would, and very specifically because of the place that you hold, especially in certain debates, especially like mythicism. Like, this is just from my research because I do a whole lot of research still on mythicism, but you're one of the best cited figures, actually, on mythicist positions. Like, your name is almost synonymous with it.
So in big trouble
when you're that well known, your name automatically commands something with its platform. Your name actually can bring a legitimizing atmosphere, and that's why specifically why so many people like having you on their channels. Not only do you give really interesting talks, but you also give legitimation by your presence, and that's why it's very critical about why we're very critical about platforms, especially in this coming age where in the age of like YouTube and stuff, where it's very easy to popularize things very quickly. There becomes a lot of responsibility with that platform, especially with self-consciousness of how platforms are used. I myself have been on the wrong side of this as well. When I first started on YouTube, I was still in the far right. So there are some really sketchy things of me out, of me seeing really bad things out there. It's not hard to find them. And it and it's unfortunately just part and parcel with having platforms, is that we have to is being conscious about the rhetoric and the language that's passed down to us and filtered to us, because when we then have that platform and then we repeat things that, like Jordan Peterson say, we end up intentionally or not legitimizing those things. And you can legitimize them in the far more malicious way than what you ever intended. I've never, for an instance, thought you were a malicious person in any of this. And I've said this to several others, like, Derek Lambert and several others, malicious. But there are people who watch you who are. And there are people who
What's the very last thing you said?
there are
who
people
watch you that are.
who watch you that are. And there are people, unfortunately. And so there are things, unfortunately, because you have a platform, that when they're said, they become legitimation. And then they can be utilized that way. And that's what makes a lot of, it is really unfair to creators like all of us that this is the case, but it then makes us have to be more self-conscious about what we say, because then those things can become very dangerous. Like even innocuous things. It's actually, I'm going to be publishing on this eventually, but even innocuous things like mythicism have had legitimation passed with, like, Nazis.
Well, I wasn't aware. I knew the Soviet Union made mythicism part of their official ideology. I didn't know Adolf and his buddies did.
Adolf wasn't, but I actually have the pamphlets. I've actually read the originals from the 1930s and 40s. It became part of an anti-Semitic legitimation effort, and it's also still used to this day in white supremacist movements. And that's
don't those nuts say that Jesus existed, but he wasn't a Jew? That's what I'm familiar with.
A lot of them did, but not all of them, especially not in the Volkish movements. But anyways, moving on from that, though, this is what makes platforms and self-consciousness of them really important, because otherwise, intentionally or not, our work becomes fuel for people that misuse it. And that's why I always make it very important to make sure my work can't be used that way, to make it explicit in my work how I disagree with those positions, how I disagree with or disagree with misconstruals of it that way. Because there are things that I write about that can be unfortunately construed that way if I didn't do that.
I'd agree with that. I think it's important to, if you're an ally, be explicit about it, because it's too easy for people to misconstrue what you say. And the other thing is, I think because of your position as a critical scholar, I think people expect a certain degree of skepticism and critical thinking from you about everything. And so while you may say, I'm a scholar of, theology or biblical studies, people still expect you to be academic in a sense in your opinions on other topics. Now, that may not be fair, right? I've probably got very uninformed opinions about football and baseball, and just because I have a PhD in biology doesn't mean you should listen to what I say about baseball or assume that I put the same amount of research into it, right? But I do think for a lot of us that felt like a lot of your talking points were parroting apologist or far right-wing media platforms like Fox News and Tucker Carlson. I think that was a problem because, right, Fox News gets on and has been sued and basically said in court under oath, hey, what we're doing is entertainment. It isn't serious news. We don't expect people to take our opinion pieces seriously. But then we have people who parrot those opinions as though they're authoritative. And then we're going, wait a second, if this guy isn't looking more seriously into these very important claims, even though they're outside of their field, people start to question, you know, what are they really doing on their scholarship? Are they really being as critical in their work as they should be if it seems to be this easy to get misinformation past them? And so that may be unfair, but I certainly think that that's what's happening here.
Well, I have found it's funny you should mention that, and very apt, because when people are aware of at least what they think my political opinions are, and even when they're right, they begin. I've had a number of times people have taken a condescending attitude toward me as if they think I'm some kind of idiot savant, that I may know my stuff with the Bible, but obviously I'm a Neanderthal with unthought out, bigoted opinions. And I think you have no way of knowing that, and
Right.
I'm just sure they're writing me off because they have a kind of dogmatic attachment to a certain party line, which I have reasons for not accepting. I don't assume they have no reasons for it. You know, honest minds differ, and facts are ambiguous and equivocal. But that does work both ways, and they say, I don't know how you can be so stupid. Basically, and so, well, maybe
Yeah.
I'm not, or maybe you should do what I'm trying to stand up for here, and wonder why would a guy like this hold these views. There might be a reason, but there's this easy dismissal that I chafe at. I mean, I've gotten I've gotten used to it now, so
Sure.
it doesn't really bother me. But that's just what you need from both sides. Like I found this with academic questions. Somebody holds a view that strikes me as absurd, but then I think, wait a minute. This is an intelligent person. There must be something and then like deconstruction was one of my, I thought this is insane, but let me take a look at this and read some of the theorists, and I wound up saying, son of a gun, they're right. With biblical things like the old chestnut that Sodom and Gomorrah, well, that just shows how God was judging homosexuals. I thought, well, yeah, that's regrettable, but reprehensible, but obviously that's what the text meant. But then I thought, wait a minute, why do people deny that? And I looked into it and I thought again, why didn't I notice this and that? They're right. So my attitude is to ask, what am I missing here? Maybe they got a point. And I find that people are just often unwilling, whether religiously or politically, to give me the benefit of that doubt and explore it a little further. So I would love to see much more of the kind of thing we're doing here, to ask, why do people think what they do, and do they know enough? Do I know enough to make certain comments? Because it does work both ways. Or
That's what I was just going to say. I was just going to say, because you made a good point where sometimes someone says something and you might think that is outrageous, like, oh, pronouns. What is all? But I mean, would you be able to admit that maybe there's something like these are things that have been thought out very carefully by people who are like, are specialized and experts in these fields, maybe.
Oh yeah, and with this particular thing, I may have spoken or written in a confused manner, but I've never thought it would be better to ignore the feelings or the requests of people as to how to refer to them. I've always thought it's simple charity or manners to communicate with them as they understand themselves.
But I want to talk about another thing because there were some issues with I think racial comments that you made. But before we do, I want to ask kind of what I see as two questions about this. If you were convinced or at least started to suspect that, hey, maybe there's something to a lot of these issues that you weren't quite getting before, or you're open to thinking about differently, would you consider maybe changing or adding like different sources of information? Like, do you know what I mean? Like if I have certain newspapers I trust, right? Or certain channels I watch to keep me up on the news, right? If I became convinced that they were routinely leading me astray, I would consider getting my news from somewhere else. Would you consider that a reasonable response to sort of re-educating people on some of these issues?
Oh, yeah. Like, for instance, this has happened to me in the wake of all kinds of revelations about the military industrial complex, the way the government is run behind the scenes. I used to take a very conservative stance about that stuff, and to think that certain things like Glenn Greenwald and others say were hysterical paranoia. And now I find, nope, son of a gun, they're right all along. So I even recently, I have undergone major changes in my beliefs about these big issues.
Wow.
Yeah, that's important. And my follow-up question would be, because I certainly think this is just the start, right? And Chrissy and I came here, and again, credit to Neil for thinking it's important to include voices from communities that were affected. But we basically came here to accept your apology and ask some questions. But I would hope that this is just the start. Would you consider, if we were to share, well, I think you know some of the problematic posts, right? And the stream with Doug, and maybe your introduction to this book. Would you consider something like sharing those with your, queer and friends of color? Like, to say, hey, people told me there was some problems with stuff I said. Would you guys, as my friends that I could, trust to give me some perspective, maybe review that? Because I think you said you have friends from all different backgrounds,
Yeah.
right? And I think that that's an important thing to have, and you're lucky, right? Because not everybody has that. But if you do, I think it would be important to go to some of your friends. That way, maybe they could give you some perspective from people who have nothing but your best interest in mind. Would you consider doing something like that?
Oh, yeah, I can think of some good candidates right off the bat. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Great. I think that's really important. Thanks, Bob. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
So one issue I wanted to bring up was comments about the word thug. That was something that really bothered us, because it seemed that you were quite dismissive of protesters. Like, if they're protesting and they're enemies of the state, they're treason, and they should be, shot down. Now, I certainly don't agree with that stance, but I think the bigger issue was when it came to the January 6th rioters, you seemed to basically unable to consider them to be lawless. It seemed like a very inconsistent standard. It seemed like, if Michael Brown is resisting arrest, then he's a thug, and he's worthless. But with people, hanging gallows outside of the Capitol, calling to hang Mike Pence, and literally screaming, "Take that cop's gun from him and shoot him with it." Then you tell people, well, I don't think they were being violent. Do you see how people see a hypocrisy there?
Well, I oppose all riots and support demonstrations and protests. So to me, the issue is actual physical violence against anybody. I think that's, but if you've got it, then you got a real problem. What is going to put out the fire, if anything? And how do you deal with it if you have people destroying your home or your business or whatever? that's a real problem, and you can't just stand by and pray about it. So that's a real toughie. But with some people, I think, are just thugs, unfortunately, who have no ideological opinion. They're just taking advantage of a situation to have, supermarket sweep. The Rodney King riots were like that. In fact, when that happened, here was Bill Cosby saying, well, really, you can't blame those oppressed blacks and all that. And I said, wait a minute, are you so sure that's who's doing this? And sure enough, it turns out, no, there were a whole lot of outside people that were not African American. So it seems to me that you can't jump to a conclusion. But if you have people violently rioting, you're talking about a real endangering of civilization. And that's what's going on in the big cities in our country.
So
And with unwise district attorneys and so forth, it's a very complex thing. But some people, I think, are just arbitrarily killing people, arbitrarily killing cops, and I don't hesitate to use rough and dismissive language about them, but they're the only ones I would use it about.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I think people take advantage of protest, and they do turn into riots, and people loot and steal, and most people, I don't know of many people, even in communities of color, that excuse that type of thing, and most of us, always are very clear about the need for lawful, peaceful protesting. But nevertheless, it seems like that doesn't always happen, right? And most of us would say if somebody breaks the law as part of a protest, they should be held accountable for breaking the law as part of the protest. But it seemed like you were not willing to condemn the violence on January 6th as, in fact, a riot. Like it seemed like you were not willing to say that this is political violence. Do you now see that as an act of political violence?
I suppose it is, and I did oppose the whole idea of it, but that's a big mess too, because it appears to me that this was orchestrated by its enemies. There's real reason to think that just like the supposed kidnapping plot with Whitmer in, it's Michigan or Wisconsin?
Michigan.
That was in my home state.
Yeah, I was in my home city. I live in Michigan.
That was by far right. That was by far right, guys.
Yeah, I live in Lansing,
Michigan. That turned out to be a real thing. I don't know if you know that, Dr. Bob, because I know there was the news from like Fox of people that were saying that it was planned, but it turned out to be a real attempt.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not so sure. It may be so, but I don't pretend to know.
They ended up doing an investigation, and they found out that it was by a bunch of far right guys, and they found
they've been convicted.
They found their Facebooks, they found all sorts of stuff that all pointed to their ideological beliefs, and they were specifically going after Whitmer because of the lockdowns.
Well, from what I heard, and that's the way I put it, I don't have the time or interest to start doing doctoral research on these things, which I would have to do to have a real opinion, which is why I don't air such opinions. I think that I've heard the opposite, that there were the feds who were involved egging on these nuts.
Well, then why even go with that? Why even go with that then? I mean,
if you don't have time,
why even listen to that opinion from those people?
Well, ultimately, I am skeptical, but I don't go around making speeches about this. I just sometimes I smell a rat, and since, like Ellul says in his book Propaganda, the average person really has no way of knowing what's going on because of the battling propaganda.
I have an idea. So, January 6th, 2021. I was still in the church, believe it or not. I was part of a church. We all got emails that there's a bus coming to my church on January 6th, early in the morning, to take us out to DC. This was a plan. I'm telling you, you know me. I'm not just going to make this up. This was a planned thing. And
did they invite you to a riot or to a demonstration?
To a demonstration. But it was intended to put the pressure on Mike Pence. Everybody was talking about it. The whole church was talking about it. Mike Pence is going to do the right thing, and we're going to be there to make sure. That was the whole point. I can show you the emails after this.
Well, that wouldn't be thuggish to me. It's like when you have violence. That's
okay.
then
All right. Well, let me just tell you another thing.
Mhm.
They brought a noose there. They were ready to. There was a noose that says, "Mike Pence, do the right thing."
That's just like hanging somebody in effigy, as far as we know.
All right. But here, just listen to where you're going. Like, I'm not telling you to change your mind on politics, but like, just kind of, I just want you to, if I could, suggest, just to try to, like, notice how you're thinking. What about? It could be this. It could be that. You're already jumping for the devil's advocate. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying. I'm not telling you to think how to think or anything. I'm just giving you
Bob, I have another.
what it looks like for the three of us. I'm guessing
Yeah.
it looks like it just seems like you're ready to jump on this side no matter what it is.
I have no idea. I have no way of knowing. I'm simply saying
All right.
I've heard things from both sides and cannot evaluate them.
All right, so let's say this then. Let's say
Well,
for the sake,
wait.
of, for the sake of argument, let's say that these were real thuggish situations going on. Would you condemn it the same way you'd condemn the other?
Yeah, sure I would.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
Hmm.
Chrissy.
No, I was just gonna say that.
So,
yeah.
So, Bob, I don't think either of us is a lawyer, right? But nevertheless, I think we both can recognize that lawyers deal with a very serious standard of evidence, right? And so it's a problem to me when we're in conspiracy theory land, when we're denying things that have been flat out investigated by the government and convicted. I mean, because at this point, right?
This
there's-
government,
Yeah. Uncle
I
Bob,
wouldn't trust them if they told me it was raining and I could see it out my window.
But you trust Fox News when they tell you that it's a false flag operation? by
No,
Antifa.
I don't just believe it. From what I've heard in detail, it gives me serious doubt.
But from who?
But I can't resolve
So
it.
then, Bob, you have an obligation
Where,
to do
where have you
research.
heard this from, though?
I'm sorry.
Where have you heard this from?
Well, I've heard it from them, but we don't want to commit the genetic fallacy. That
Well,
if Fox
yeah, but
says it,
it's not
gotta
always
be
a genetic
wrong.
It's not always a genetic fallacy to point out when your source isn't reliable.
Well, I don't think that's true. I wonder how much people that speak about faux news have
But
ever
they've
really
admitted in a
watched.
court of law that it's untrue. And this is what I mean. At some point, you're not being reasonable as a scholar if you are denying things that have been determined in a court of law. I mean, you can say you don't trust the government, but at some point you're right. Like this is the type of skepticism that would not be if four biblical scholars got together and they reviewed the case and they argued for the evidence. I mean, we're being dismissive of our legal system, right? If you're
I am, and I am compelled to be, given the mischief that's going on in this country.
All right. Well, I think we're getting a little off topic.
Yeah,
I just
we are.
want
I
to say
understand.
this, and I, look at Dr. Bob. You're on the right. Everyone's allowed to be on whatever side of the political spectrum. Nobody can take that from you. That's who you are. You're conservative. But I want to make this about making sure that we go about things and we present ourselves in a way that when we say certain stuff, we are mindful that certain people are affected by those things. That's all I'm trying to do here is establish that going forward, and even if you would like to take responsibility for the past, just let's try to treat people as individual and try to treat people with respect and not try to say things that we might harm. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Amen.
Okay.
So I agree. Here's my concern. First off, I think you do have an obligation to do your homework as soon as you broadcast about something. If you say something on air, if you say something on a broadcast, if you say something on social media, you're throwing your hat in the ring. You are saying, I have an educated opinion about this. I think other people should hear my educated opinion. And then you're stating what it is. Now, if people come back to you and they say, hey, man, that's off. Like, you're not seeing this right. I do think that obligates you to do something about it, because it's just like as a scientist, if I go to publish something and another scientist goes to replicate my data and they go, hey man, we're not coming up with this, and I don't address it, I mean, that's how can that be considered, virtuous communication where people can trust me? So the issue is, I hear you don't want to hurt people, but if your source of where you get your information from is itself a weaponized source that is continuously feeding you the talking points that are hurtful, you continue to be exposed, right? As long as you're going to get up there and if you're not going to change where you're getting your information from, you might post something tomorrow that has us right back in the situation. And that's what people are concerned about. And I think at some point you've got to say, if I've misspoken about, for instance, the Governor Whitmer situation, then yeah, I've got to do my homework. If people keep telling me I'm not seeing the January 6th hearings, the January 6th situation correctly, and you have not watched the January 6th committee hearings, or you have read the report, that's the Congress, Bob. Bob, I'll tell you what, I think you're a reasonable guy. But
it was also a bipartisan Congress.
I mean, I don't want to stay on this topic too much, but we do have Supreme Court justices appointed by Trump that are like, no, this election wasn't stolen. I mean, I think
they wouldn't hear the case.
Full stop right there. No, they
wouldn't hear it because
they wouldn't hear it because there's no case. There's
no case. It was dismissed from every court, including from every Trump-appointed judge that they went to.
I agree with you. Let's just say this, Dr. Bob. Will you just look at maybe you and I can discuss this further and look at it. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should change my mind. I doubt that. But
I don't care what you think. I mean, I don't care what I think. It's not germane to what we're all about.
We're not going to change your mind right here. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's like, let's do this later. Maybe we can talk about this later. But I do want to stay focused on the issue of saying certain things that people get offended by, and try to prevent that. That's all. Try to understand that certain people, when you say certain things, people get offended. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to change your mind on the election or try to change your not be right wing anymore or anything.
All right, I'll be clear about this. I have 3 standards of what I think are necessary for someone to make a real apology. Number 1, it needs to be sincere. They have to actually feel bad. It can't just be, I'm saying sorry because I've been told to say sorry. I'm saying sorry because I want my Twitter account back. It has to be, I'm saying sorry because I feel bad about what I did. The second requirement has to be meaningful. It can't be, I'm sorry your feelings were hurt. I'm sorry this all blew up, and I'm sorry relationships were. It has to be, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry because I did something wrong, and I can acknowledge what I did wrong. The third part is the hardest often. It has to be corrective. The person has to realize I did something wrong. I hurt people as a result of what I did wrong. And now I have to change. I have to do the hard part of doing the work to make sure I don't continue to hurt people. I'm 100% with you on the first 2 parts, but the issue is, in order for this to be corrective, we've got to get you some sort of resources and tools so that you're not going back to the same sources that fed you the information that you repeated that was harmful to begin with. It's like when somebody comes out of religion or something like that. We're totally willing to show them grace for anything they may have done up until that point that is not representative of who they want to be. But they've got to stop going back to the thing, or else they're going to keep hurting people over and over and over again. So if you want us to give you a pass, I was misinformed, I didn't understand, I was getting information from the wrong places, we're like, cool, great, we totally willing to show you grace on that. But you've got to show willingness to do some work to get it right next time.
You sound to me as if I need to enter a re-education procedure.
Gently, I think you do.
This seems to me condescending, and you've got to.
Let's keep it simple here. Let's be mindful of. The whole point of this was that We don't have to change who we are or what our political views are. Let's be mindful of who we affect when we say things. Can we agree on? Can we get back to that?
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
But why would you not want to get re-educated on these issues? I mean, that's what we all are dealing with. We all feel a burden to learn more and take in new information as the world around us continues to change.
I think I'm doing that. You just think it doesn't qualify.
Well, it's not because it's because of the resistance that happens. Like when you don't want us to, like when we ask what the sources were, because we're trying to offer ourselves up and offer things as resources, but we have to also know, like, what are the resources that were being used before? Because if we don't,
is that really germane? Yeah. I mean, I listened
let's think about this as like, you're a historian. We do history. When we want to investigate, for instance, did Jesus exist? And everyone loves to just throw out Tacitus. I think it's very germane. Where did Tacitus get his information?
Yes, very much.
We can't just accept what Tacitus said at face value. And likewise, when we're discussing these situations and we want to be able to offer correctives specifically for the purposes of further education and research and bettering ourselves, bettering our knowledge, it is good to criticize where things are originating from, those sources, to figure that out. Because otherwise, we're just still on square one. If we decide we're still on square one. We're still just looking at Tacitus without thinking about the sources that may have actually originated them. I bring this up in this situation. We're trying to we want to be able to, you came here, you specifically say that you are trying to do this to learn more, to actually take it to these perspectives. And we want to help you do that. And one thing that helps us do that is things like knowing sources. So when you say that, this is a genetic fallacy, and you defend and you essentially do a fallacy hand wave to defend those sources, it cuts off our ability, and it makes it seem defensive, and makes it really hard for us to even know how to go about talking to you about these things.
Well, I have to admit I'm stumped at this point, because this seems to me to go way beyond what we were talking about. And I'm being told
it goes back to the apology bit. It goes back to the apology bit is the thing. Is like the third major part of an apology is accepting that we did wrong and making sure we don't do that again. Learning not to do that. You said you were doing that, like trying to listen to us and trying to take in those perspectives from like me, from like trans people who are affected by some of the things that you say, or from people of color that are also affected by some of the things you say. But if you then resist scrutinization of where your information stems from, you resist our ability to actually offer critique.
Have you ever watched Fox News and heard the constant back and forth?
Yes.
Well, then that they have representatives of the left, the extreme left, the right, the extreme right, talking all the time.
Yeah, they usually bring on like the most like extreme point they can find.
But Fox News has already admitted on record that they're not a news source.
That strikes me highly dubious.
Let's not stay on Fox News.
No, but that's where he gets his news from. That's where he keeps defending. I mean,
but we can't. We're not going to make him like. This is going to take time. And
I get that, but if he goes back to watching Tucker Carlson tonight, he's going to go back to
Well, I'm going to continue watching Tucker Carlson because he's the only skeptical person on TV.
I don't even know what to do with that. But Bob, here's how I think about it. You and I agree that, and I think most people here would agree that if somebody says something problematic, our first recourse should not be cancel them, shut them down, delete their channel, don't ever talk to them again. Okay, fine. But we have to be able to start somewhere. To me, if we're not going to do that, we're not going to cancel people. Okay, let's also not even ridicule people. People have different opinions. They start from different places. Let's meet people where they're at. So let's not ridicule them because that's hurtful too. What gentler approach do we have? Especially, I'm asking this one PhD to another. What gentler approach do we have to correcting people's behavior than educating them and giving them good information on areas of life where they've already misrepresented the information? We're not asking you to take in new information about planetary physics or, Marvel comics, stuff you've never taken a stance on. We're saying, Bob, you have publicly taken stances that were, one, hurtful, and two, the people you heard are telling you are incorrect. What
I think
do
they are
we have if
probably
we can't share
incorrect.
information with you?
I think they are probably incorrect, but I'm not going to insist that they change their views.
Okay, even if you thought they were probably incorrect, how would we find that out? So they tell you that you're wrong and you've hurt us. You say I'm right and you shouldn't have been hurt like that. What do we do now if we don't just say I'll share my sources with you, you share your sources with me, and we'll convene and talk about it again later?
That just introduces another huge thing that expands this into what I think will only get things murkier. And I don't know why that is a condition for reconciliation. That I like, because I see what I am hearing from various sources, Fox, but other things too, and different voices on those shows. I think I am being pretty well informed, but I know that there's so much to it that I could spend my life trying to get to the bottom of something that ultimately is irrelevant to me personally. Like January 6th, interesting question, but I don't feel compelled to take a big chunk of my time to look into it more than I have, and I am making only statements of my suspicions. I don't pretend to know what happened in a lot of these things, but I'm sure not going to take the word from the establishment spokespeople from any regime.
All right. Well, can I just
Sure, go ahead, Nick.
Before anything, I actually have to head out here. So
All right.
Oh,
Thank
nice
Great
meeting
to
you,
see
Chrissy.
you again.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks for coming, Chrissy. Good to see you. Now, I want to read the super chats, and I just want to end.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I want to end on this. Look, going forward, can we? I'm me myself too, Dr. Bob, you, and Jay. Can we try to be more mindful of what we say and try to take into other considerations, even if we don't agree with it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Bob, I want to make this clear. I'm not putting conditions on your forgiveness. First off, people make jokes in the chat, but we can joke about me being the spokesblack person. I'm here because Neil was, I think, responsible enough trying to do what we want allies to do, which is bring voices from affected communities to the table. That does not mean that we come to the table as representatives of all people who were affected.
I don't think so. Yeah, I didn't think that.
Yeah. But with that being said, it's all a request, Bob. It's never a demand. It's always a request. And the request is genuinely saying, first, I do think you genuinely feel bad that you hurt people. And I genuinely think you don't want to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. My suggestion is, and I think the first one that you agreed to, I'm happy with that, right? The fact that you would maybe take some of the things that people have had problems with, take it to your friends in some of these other communities, and see what they think, because I think that would be a safe space for you to get probably even more critical feedback than we've given you here, right? And so yeah, then the request is just if you do become convinced, hey, maybe I've stepped in it here or said some things I wish I didn't say, all I'm suggesting is that taking in more information from those communities, from other sources, may help you see it coming next time, right? That's all.
Yeah, and I just want to say before we go to the super chats, I didn't think this was going to be a smooth conversation. I had a feeling that there would be some bumps in here because I just know how Dr. Bob is, and I want to say going forward, like when I get with Dr. Bob, it's never, I don't ever ask him what he thinks about what happened on Fox that day. I'm always, it's literally straight to let's dig deep into the lore. Let's read Lucian. Let's read Herodotus. Let's read the New Testament stuff. That's it. And that's what I want to do with that's always been our relationship, Dr. Bob. And so I hope, I'm not telling you what to do, but I hope to see going forward, I hope to see you try a little bit to be a little bit more mindful. That's all. And I hope that this experience that, like, obviously you weren't like offended by the cancel, like you said, but I just hope that maybe something comes out of this, some sort of growth. That's all. That's my last 2 cents.
Yeah. Also, Bob, I'd add to that, we don't have peer review. We really don't. Right. And I was in a job interview today, and I told them, the YouTube is the most powerful educational platform in the world, but it's probably also the largest purveyor of misinformation. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we are trying to use the social network to exercise a bit of that quality control. And so since people don't feel like they have we can't report somebody to the YouTube authorities, and, people have to make their own choices about what they can and consume. And so I hope that, people made it about the issues. And I hope that, people understand we're here to talk about the issues. And I hope that people weren't just insulting you and saying hurtful things to you, because I don't think that's helpful. Right. So, I really do appreciate your time.
Oh, yours as well.
Thanks.
And the first super chat we got, and I feel like it's good to revisit this question. Thank you, Kasha, for the super chat. Is Bob sorry?
As in a sorry son of a bitch?
Go ahead. Answer this question. The floor is yours.
I'm sorry for having made people feel bad. I think, however, they have on many points misunderstood me, but that is quite likely because of infelicity in my expression. But I don't want to hide behind the idea, well, if you didn't like it, it must be your fault. There certainly needs to be better communication and greater care taken on my part, for sure.
I would say thank you for that. We'll go to the next one. Constellation Pegasus, who is also obviously a Dr. Bob fan. This is wrong. Mr. Price does not have to justify or explain anything. If anyone had hurt butt, critical faculty went through all this crap. Keep doing what you're doing, Mr. Price. Political correctness be damned. And
I'll just say that Dr. Price did not have to justify or explain anything, but we're here because he offered to.
Exactly.
and I think that's a credit to him. Seriously.
Most people don't realize that. Like, he took the proactive stance in this situation. Even if we had some back and forths and disagreements in this chat, the bottom line is I see from Dr. Bob coming out and saying, let's clear the air. That to me, that's a huge thing. So, Dr. Contra Pegasus, I understand you feel that way, and I thank you for the super chat. And I'm not going to ignore your voice in this, but I do want to put it out there that Dr. Bob, do you have anything you want to say about that?
No, I appreciate the sentiment, though. Yeah. But I would also say that I don't feel like I'm responsible to an inquisition
Right.
to account for myself. I really do
Thanks.
seek communication, which is the only way to solve anything.
Exactly. What well said. Well said.
Yeah, and Bob, you just gave pushback based on where you're at, and we did the same thing. If people pay attention to this conversation, it was a great conversation. You really listened to us and heard what we had to say, and you did clear up a lot of things. So thanks.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And then Constellation Pegasus says, has being offended in political correctness so trenched we can't insult our military enemies before we kill them now? I just don't think it's the same thing when you're talking about Russia versus people that live in our own country. But I don't want to spend too much time on
Sure.
this. If anyone else wants to say anything,
No.
real quick. All right. Thank you for that super chat, Constellation Pegasus. Cindy Lamachia, thank you for the super chat. Dr. Bob, do you feel bad at all for being hurt? For
people being
hurt. I wish to see you become educated and be a voice of reason.
Let me read that myself out.
Good question. Thank you, Cindy.
For people being hurt. Well, I like to think, I hope I am being a voice of reason, and I often really do not understand what some people find offensive, and it leads me to believe they just cannot stand being disagreed with, but I may be wrong about that. And again, that's the point of this exercise tonight.
Yeah, I'll say two quick things about that. He did say he feels bad for people being hurt. And I think Cindy is echoing Christy and I's same request, Bob. We heard you say you don't understand a lot, right? And so we just hope you would take it on to try to continue your education beyond tonight so that you can understand. And the be a voice of reason, I think, is what our ultimate hope would be, right? Is sometimes, so we hope that this stream will get the same type of attention your original stream with Doug did, but it may not, right? Sometimes the bad science paper goes viral, nobody reads the correction. So I think the goal is that in the future you'll be able to more explicitly state your allyship with our trans community, with people of color, and that people hear that from you up front, and then that becomes the context for everything you say, rather than people hearing stuff that may be misinterpreted, may be a miscommunication, and then it has to come out later that you're an ally, right? I think maybe, hopefully from this experience, you see that it is important for people in this community to hear support from you. That's what people really want. They want your support, Bob.
Thank you for that. And a really great super chat, Cindy. Thank you for that as well.
Thanks.
Mika Valen, thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Dr. Bob, for trying to understand. I forgive you. Please continue this way.
All right, Mika.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for that super chat, Mika. Appreciate that. Michelle Lamato for the $4.99. Thank you. I kind of knew Bob was older and was able to let his politics slide. But this is great to see him attempt to understand things.
Thank you. Sure appreciate that, Michelle.
I think that's what it all comes down to, is just to try to understand people. Even for me to try to understand you on certain things, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to try. I'm not going to say that I'm going to be convinced about certain Fox News talking points. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to be convinced, but at least I'll listen to it. I'll hear it out. You know?
Or I'll give you one. Check this. I love TYT. I'm a liberal. I'm on the left, right? So somebody suggested to me, I wish Bob watched TYT.
What is that? I'm sorry.
Sorry, the Young Turks. It's like a
I've heard
it's like a leftist channel. Now, they said they like the Young Turks because they show both sides. Right? Now, isn't that interesting? You think of the Young Turks as probably way out to the left, which I'm fine with, right? But
I don't know enough about them. I've had minimal.
Right. Well, they consider themselves progressive, right? But our stance is they're progressive, but they show both sides, right? Now, most people who don't agree with us would say, no way. That's a leftist. They call themselves progressive. They're totally on the left, right? So then that should allow me to understand what Bob said. He's on the right. Fox News is one of the biggest news platforms, right, for better or worse, on the right. And as he sees it, and I watch it, and I try to watch Fox News, believe it or not, I watch a lot of right-wing stuff just to get both sides. But Fox News does put both sides up there. They do have Democratic politicians come on. They do have leftist commentators come on their channel. And so I don't think it's unreasonable for him to respond with, hey, I think I am getting a fair and balanced side. I do think Tucker Carlson's critical. I don't agree, but I certainly understand how he probably feels the same way about his news sources that I feel about mine. I'm willing to take in some news sources from the other side, and I'm encouraging him to do the same, and I don't think he probably considers that an unreasonable request.
No.
Yeah.
Where would I find this? The Young Turks.
The Young Turks. You can just look them up.
I'll send them a
TYT.
link. I'll send
We'll send
them
you a
right
link. We'll send you a link. All right.
Okay,
There
great.
we go. Boom. All right. Look, chat. We're hooking Uncle
Yeah.
Bob. We're hooking Dr. Bob up with some news sources.
It's good to see you. Thank you for that. Super chat. Critical Faculty in the house. Everyone go subscribe to my boy Critical Faculty. Fantastic to see Bob clears the air. He's one of the nicest people I have known. Thanks, Neil, for hosting this important event. Anything you want to say about that?
Thanks for the support. Thanks for supporting the channel. I think this was awesome for Neil to do this, and thanks to Dr. Bob for showing up and support your independent content creators. A great $20 super chat.
Yeah, thank you for that. super
Fantastic.
chat. I appreciate that. Dr. Bob, you want to say hi to Critical Faculty? That's your friend, right?
Yeah, I can't wait to share another show. I know soon we will be.
Well, go and subscribe to Critical Faculty. Thank you for that super chat. Chat GPT is in the house. AI is here to weigh in. Is it true that Price called for BLM protesters to be shot? And let's make it clear, he didn't call for them to be shot. You were talking about a scenario and that you thought.
And I just he said rioters should be shot in general. He didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It
Oh,
was
but
in a
this is-
context. It was a conversation about the Black Lives Matter protest,
he
but I
lost it.
didn't. I don't think he signaled them out.
But to and I know Bob would say this. He'll be right back. He gets timed out by his internet. But this is the thing that he wanted to clear up, and he understood that what he said was wrong. Like it was just offensive. Like this is one of the things that we are doing. This is the reason why we're doing this. But thank you for that super chat GPT. I appreciate that. I think Dr. Bob should be back any second now.
But yeah, I think the issue we had with that was he was making a statement generally about rioters, and where people felt the contradiction came in was he saw the Black Lives Matter movement as a violent riot, but not the January 6th issue. I don't recall him saying specifically that the Black Lives Matter protesters should be shot, so much as he was saying he thinks rioters are treasonous and then they should be shot as a result of being declared treasonous. Is that correct, Bob?
Yeah, that you're dealing with a war, a battlefield situation there, whether you want to call it that or not. And that means, sadly, that you have to fight fire with fire, but hopefully that can be avoided. You can't just stand by and let...
But can we clear the air? You don't think peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters should be shot?
No, heck no. No. In fact, one of the most encouraging, refreshing things I ever saw on TV was a Black Lives Matter peaceful rally where a bunch of conservatives, I forget what their label was, came to protest it. But what they did was to have dialogue. And by the end of the thing, they were taking selfies with their arms around each other. And so I thought, this is a miracle. If this can happen. Just a second.
Nice ring.
That's awesome. That's the best moment of the stream.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
But that.
It's too
Jacob, I'm still on. Yeah, I'll call you back when I get done.
Okay, all right. Let's see. I think I lost my spot on the.
the next, you're the one after this.
Okay. Constellation Pegasus says, what papers and news outlets the biology PhD watches for his trusted news?
Oh, you want to know about my news sources? That's weird. Yeah. So I watch the Young Turks. I watch David Pakman. I watch Midas Touch. I do sometimes
Sam
watch
Cedar?
right-wing news outlets. Yeah, Sam Cedar. And I tend to read the New York Times the most. Like that's what I pay for. I get a daily couple of feeds from the New York Times. And then otherwise I read typically Reddit, Washington Post, stuff like that. Yeah.
Well said.
But yeah, my stuff's got a lean to it. I know. So it is what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, it's a good question from
Yeah,
Constant.
yeah, it's a good question.
We just
Yeah.
wondered. Thank you for that. Kensington Cisco, thank you for the super chat. Is it called freedom of speech? Dr. Bob is right. What are these other nobodies' credentials, by the way? Well, I don't know if it's well, first of all, there's no nobody, but tell them your credentials if they're wondering, you know?
Yeah, I have a dual PhD in integrative biology and ecology, evolutionary biology, and behavior. And I'm currently a postdoctoral I also have a master's in biological anthropology from Penn State, and I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher in the ecology, evolution, and biology department at the University of Minnesota. Go Golfers!
And to answer for Chrissy's no joke either. Chrissy's got 15 peer-reviewed published papers, and Chrissy's on her way to get a PhD. So that's on the way. She's already postgraduate right now. So
Yeah, that guy is brilliant.
A lot more degrees than people on screen tonight, so that's pretty cool.
Thank you for that super chat, Natalia Emerson. Sorry, anyways, please be mindful going forward, Dr. Bob. Thanks.
Thank you for the encouragement.
Yes, Natalia. That's the main point here. Yep, 100% agreement.
Thank you for that.
Appreciate you.
There's a couple more. I'm scrolling down through all these comments. Damn, there's a lot of comments. There we go. Does Dr. Bob read on CRT and sociology? Thank you, Amir Ashafra, for the super chat.
Well, so I have a passing acquaintance with some people, especially in sociology, if not by no means greatly studied in it. And with CRT, I just hear about that. I don't pretend to say anything about it.
All right. Thank you for that super chat. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Balde Binos dropping the $2 euro on us. Thank you for the super.
Oh, we always love that.
Yeah. Let's
Just
see.
Unconditional support.
Oh, another one from
Boom.
Three Things Fishing. Nice. Thank you for that super chat. Let's see what else we got. There's a couple. Ricky Johnson in the house. Thank you for hosting this discussion, Neil. Thank you. Super chat, Ricky. Appreciate that. Here we go. Gina McDonald. Can you announce your allyship to LGBT plus and people of color? This is important, Dr. Bob.
Yeah, I have been for gay rights within and without evangelical Christianity for decades. And I have written about that for a long time. And with people of color, oh yeah. I've again, I mean, I haven't marched in the streets or anything, but I've done what little I can do by sermonizing and writing about these issues. One of my favorite old sermons I did, which is a pretty long one, was called Malcolm X and Jesus X. And James Cone liked it. So I figured it couldn't be too far off the target, but I have always, and women's rights in church, which again is the only sphere of influence I had, I've always tried to arrange for women to do ministerial things in any church I had something to do with. I made sure that when my first daughter was baptized in the Episcopal Church, that we had a female deacon doing it. And I've done stuff like that before.
Let me just, I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, go ahead.
And this might be just a language thing, but as far as, because I saw someone in the chat express, announces allyship for gays and blacks, but skip trans. Could you just say, can you clarify that as well?
Oh, no, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. I didn't mean to leave anybody out, but that's. I remember, for example, once when Carol and I were in Denny's having dinner, and the waitress was fairly obviously a trans person, very sweet person. I didn't think, oh my God, what is. I just looked at her as an individual, and I am open to anybody, and so they're just everybody is a person to me. It doesn't really matter what flag they're flying or armband they're wearing. It just doesn't matter. So if that means I'm pro, then I certainly am.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Only thing I'd like to add is, Bob, man, everything happens in context, right? And you know, I've gone off on Doug and other people in our community on these issues, and part of the thing I always try to bring to the table is that context matters, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's fair to say, probably for myself, I'm certainly for you, you can look at the world and see progress in a sense, right? Things are getting better. You know, we're seeing people of color in positions that we didn't in the past, and you know, we're having big conversations about trans issues, and we're having, you know, weeks about anti-misogyny, even in biblical scholarship. All of this is great things, but we have to remember that there's a real war going on, right? People are still being murdered, as far as we can tell, simply for the crime of being black. Our LGBT plus community is under real attack. And I just want to make sure going forward that when we're mindful about that we keep that in our mind, right? That it's not about us taking the right stance. It's not about being politically correct. It's about marginalized people are still being marginalized. That's still a serious risk to their lives and their lives and their safety. And it's important that people understand that we don't stand for that. So thank you for answering that question explicitly.
Thank you for that. This is probably one of the dumbest analogies you're ever going to hear in your entire life, but they paid, so I will thank you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
For
yeah.
Friend in Yellow, white slave owners were offended and hurt when slaves were freed. Are they owed an apology? Is that logical?
Oh, as a person, I'm not even gonna dignify that
Like,
with
there's
the
some things that are
response.
I saw Doug make a comment about
Yeah.
should we be afraid for Christians' feelings? We're talking about ideas and people.
Look, if
Talking about
somebody,
people
if somebody
trying to
that,
just be treated as a normal individual versus an entire ideology that gave us the Dark Ages. Like, this is totally
yeah.
complete. The analogy sucks, bro. Like,
If someone
you're
doesn't, if
you're
someone
reaching
doesn't,
stars on that one.
Well,
if
this
someone
isn't
doesn't like
really
me and they want to
analogous, is
send
it? I mean,
no, of course
the
not.
pro-slavers, no doubt, were pretty pissed off, but that's not being offended.
Yeah, and
And
if they were
plus, if they
offended,
were, too bad.
exactly, fuck them. They're fucking slave owners. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Well, are you going to say that somebody who's trans or black is somehow equal to being a slave owner?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you talking about? What is wrong with you? How stupid are you?
If somebody doesn't like me and they want to send my friend money and reveal how stupid they are in the same comment, all I have to say is thank you.
That's crazy. Yeah. Oh, what about the Christians? You're gonna feel no, fuck off. That was the dumbest thing I ever heard. Like read some books, dude. Thank you, Critical Faculty, for super chat. During a 10-episode series, I found Bob to be neither a racist nor a bigot. Once you go deep in conversation with him, you'll find more in common ground than you ever thought possible. Wow. What do you think about that, Bob?
Yeah, I was very pleased at the way our conversations had come out and how we found that, just as he says, that we agreed well, I didn't know him well enough to expect to disagree with him, but I just knew he was a rational guy, and we talked about all these issues from different standpoints, and I was very pleased with every one of them, and much impressed with Hanny himself.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Where's the next one at? I just saw, oh, here, Lena, a good friend of all of us. We love you, Dr. Bob. Just stop spreading misinformation, please. And then
Well, I'm hoping
sweetheart.
I'm not spreading misinfo.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Nicholas Lamar.
Thank you so much, Lena.
Yeah. That no. Every study of Fox viewers find them the most ignorant of facts, like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Of any news, Fox does not educate or teach facts. Ooh.
I respectfully disagree.
Yeah. I agree.
I agree.
But yeah, that's another topic for another day. But thank you for the super chat. Chat GPT, thank you for the super chat. I am a gay Iraq veteran, returned Peace Corps volunteer ×3. Every time this country asked me to serve, I said yes. When do I get to have rights?
100%.
I hope you have rights, right? I mean, is there?
No, I mean, I think the point here is they've served the country multiple times,
Okay,
and that we're still fighting to take the rights of gay people from them. I mean, the current Republican Party's made it clear that this is their agenda.
I was general shabby treatment of veterans, but I see what you mean.
Yes, and this is and I think this is another just request for allyship from Dr. Bob, right? This is just a person who's saying this is my experience. And I think this apolitical, right? They're a service person. They're clearly not some kind of left-wing radical person, right? And nevertheless,
my
they're
hat's
just saying,
off to you, whatever your political views are. You're a better man than I am, and my hat's off to you.
Thanks for your service and your super chat.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Rex Profanus, NTD News is best with least biased and obfuscation.
What is NTD? Why am I not?
NTD News. I have no idea. NTD News. Let's look it up. NTD News. New Tang Dynasty Television, New York City. Oh,
NTD News.
Check it out. I'll check out. I'll take that. I'll check it out. I'll see what they're about.
Yeah. All right.
Heard of them till now, but thank you for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Always appreciate the recommendation. Yeah, I pulled it up too.
Oh yeah, ContraPoints is a good channel too.
ContraPoints. All right.
I'm not gonna. I'm a $25 Patreon for ContraPoints.
Whoa!
I've never heard of
he's a
either of
real
these.
Well, the
supporter.
reason why I enjoy
All right.
I enjoy ContraPoints.
Well, hey, that's what we mean. It's changing sources. This is
every
good.
ContraPoints video is like a film. It's well written. It's got plot twists, and I love it so much that because if you join the $25 Patreon tier, you get to vote on the topics.
You're like, I need input.
Yeah, the last topic I voted for was the new atheist movement, so I voted on that. But anyways, thank you for that. That's a good point. My camera is having but it's okay. At least you can still hear me. So let me just turn this off for a few minutes. I'll read the next super chat right now. Let's see. There's a lot of comments. Here we go. Stephanie Helms. If Dr. Bob would care to engage with a trans person closer to his age, I am 69 and transitioned 25 years ago. This isn't new.
Yes. I recently, if you check out my channel, Pocket Locker 86, we had Stephanie on this Sunday to talk about trans. I think probably one of the best shows we've ever done. But Stephanie's been popping up all over the community and has a fantastic voice. And, Dr. Bob, if you'd be willing to, I'd be happy to try to set that up for you guys.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That would be great. That's a good idea, actually. I think. Yeah.
Terrific.
So see, that's why I want to do this. I want to like Dr. Bob he's understanding of things. We just have to duke it out a little bit with him. That's all.
Also, can we acknowledge the difference between people who say they're our allies, who we, don't completely agree with, but we're happy to hear that they're our allies, versus people who we don't agree with and are very clear that they have no interest in being our allies. That's just big difference. But also, I was just going to say, I think perspective matters. And so I do think it helps to hear from near peers, people that have shared more history with you, seen the world change through many of the same changes that you've seen. So that'd be great. Yeah.
Thank you for that super chat, Stephanie, and we'll definitely get that going. It's a great idea. Paul Kickling in the house, OT, but I think Bob would agree with me. He is not a mythicist. He is a theologian, psychoanalyst, He transcends those reductionist Neanderthals.
Well, I do try to. I really hesitate to say I'm a philosopher, but that is what I would like to be, let's say, because I really see all these fields that interest me interpenetrating. Like, I don't think you can do New Testament scholarship adequately if you don't know quite a bit about ancient culture, just like Neil says, and mythology, but also sociology of knowledge, sociology of religion, philosophy of religion. I learned as an undergraduate at Montclair State in the religion and philosophy department that you really have to get some kind of acquaintance with all these fields. And as Van Harvey said in his great book, The Historian and the Believer, history is a field encompassing field. And I feel that way about all these fields.
Yep.
And
yep.
so I even
point.
would accept the term theologian, which is what I'm called on Wikipedia. I think, even though I don't believe in God, I take the question seriously, and I realize there's value in the study of it. And so I agree very much with what Paul is saying here.
But you are a mythicist in the sense that you don't believe Jesus was a real person.
Yes. I guess he means like not only that, like an
yes, yeah. I see. Yeah, and also I think theologian, psychoanalyst is really interesting. Do you consider yourself that way? Do you see yourself as sort of breaking down, I guess the mind behind the material when it comes to a lot of the text?
Yeah, and this is one of the many things I love about Paul Tillich. You can't really tell in his presentation where theology ends and psychology begins, partly because, as he says, God is found in the depth of our being. So I really like that phrase, and it's an honor to have somebody call me that.
Sure. Appreciate that. Thanks, Paul.
Also, that term theologian started off with the Orphics.
Oh, I did have a mythicist question for you, Dr. Bob. If I could ask one. If I get to be, let me ask Dr. Bob one of these good old mythicist questions. But no, seriously, what's next, right? And here's what I mean by that. I think you're convinced of the mythicist case. Certainly Dr. Carrier is. Some people in our community have been swayed by Carrier's work or yours and Fitzgerald. At the same time, it still feels like the historians are still maybe the dominant force in the academy, right? And they're still doing their thing. And it feels to me like Carrier has expressed no interest in an academic career. And so I'm only asking this because I'm an academic, right? And I see it as I got to do my research, but a big part of what I do is train the next batch of biologists so we can keep this thing moving forward. What would you like to see mythicists do next to get more of that, recognition, make it more mainstream if we can't count on Dr. Carrier taking a tenured position anytime soon?
Well, I think that this is very likely to repeat what happened with so-called Old Testament minimalism. When Thomas L. Thompson did his original work, he wasn't the only one that said this, but he said like virtually all the Old Testament characters and stories are fictional. And archaeology doesn't bear any of it out, et cetera, et cetera. He not only couldn't get published, but he couldn't get a job anywhere and wound up painting houses for a living for 10 years. Well, then somehow the wind changed and people in the guild began to say, I think this guy is right. And Jason Van Seters and Niels Peter Limke are right. And so now, if you're not a fundamentalist, everybody is pretty much a minimalist. They don't believe Moses ever existed, for instance. Well, that happened fairly quickly, actually, given the huge history of belief in all of this being literally true. Well, I see the same signs happening with more mainstream scholars whom no one would dare dismiss as somewhat of a nutcase, thinking, maybe mythicism is true. Like Philip R. Davies, a great Old Testament scholar, shortly before his death, had begun to think maybe the mythicists are right. The same issues that compel belief that Moses didn't exist really recur in the case of Jesus. And there are people like Thompson again, and Thomas L. Brody, who was a Roman Catholic monk and came up to a mythicist position, and others are saying, this isn't that kooky. And maybe it's not kooky at all. And so what we see, I think, here is what Thomas Kuhn talks about in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, that every radical new paradigm has to run the gauntlet. It's going to meet all kinds of resistance from the old guard because they got the Moss backs. All their work is predicated on a previous paradigm, and it's going to take a lot for them to give it an even break. But that's good, because the new theory, if it's very different, has to prove itself. And so eventually, as the old guard dies off, sadly, you may find a new paradigm comes to rule the field. And I think it's quite likely that will happen with mythicism, though I must say it doesn't make any difference to me whether it does or not. I'm just interested in the issue.
Yeah. No, I just asked for your perspective. Yeah. And and it's funny you mention that, because I say the same thing about evolutionary biology. I say it's probably the most well-supported theory in biology, because it had to be, right? Because of that built-in resistance. But sort of what you're saying is that it'll become a little bit more normalized. Maybe people realize it's not so weird. That sort of softens the environment. And then when a future academic comes along, it's sort of easier than it would have been for somebody like Carrier to then be accepted as a mainstream scholar.
Right. Oh, yes.
And it could happen, you don't know how long, but it could happen relatively quickly, like it did with other issues. Okay. Thank you so much. Great answer. Appreciate that.
Appreciate that too.
And look, we got a mythicism question in there, folks. We're giving it to you all tonight.
Right. So this is the last super chat of the night.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Muslim apologist says, too American-centric for me to understand. But I just want to say hi, Dr. Price. Will you be willing to come on my channel again?
Oh, of course. Yes.
Well, there's your answer to that. And
an honor.
Yeah. So I think that's it for them. Look, I'm just looking at some extra comments at the end. And yeah, it looks like that's it for the night. I'm gonna say before we end this thing, I just want to give you the floor, Dr. Bob, to say anything you'd like to say regarding on what just happened and what you want to see going forward.
Well, I am open to everybody with every opinion. I want to know more about them and why they think what they think. It's quite likely it will change my mind, or simply understanding it is a change of mind. That's what I seek, in the same way that in teaching and writing, I am not trying to convert people to be Christ disciples, God forbid, but to perform a Socratic role as a midwife, trying to just contribute their ongoing synthesis, to supply perspectives and information that may be new to them and may be helpful in their work. Well, I feel that way in terms of persons, their perspectives on life, and their opinions. I don't think it can go wrong that way.
Well, oh, whoops. All right. I appreciate that. And anything you want to say, Jay, and before we close out?
No, I just want to thank everybody for showing up. I want to thank Dr. Bob for doing this. I want to thank Neil for inviting me. I want to thank Chrissy for joining us. And I definitely want to thank the community for all their support. I'm over at Pocket Locker 86 if you want to come check us out. Also host shows with Gin and Truth, and hot program with my one black friend on Sundays. So shout out to my one black friend, Gin and Truth, James, Nitty, all the other content creators in our community. Appreciate all you guys. Shout out to my mods. Just love you guys. Thanks so much for the short support. And Neil, thanks for having me.
Before I do want to show.
Go Science.
Yeah, I do want to. Where is it? I have your.
Oh man.
I want to show your channel real quick. Where did it go? Pocket Locker 86. Oh, there it is.
I guess you're gonna have to go find it.
Yeah. So go and subscribe. Pocket Locker 86. Hit that bell.
Yeah, come be part of our first 1,000.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah.
Also, Caterpillar. You don't have to super chat.
Neil, can you pull that up again real quick?
Where?
My channel real quick.
Yeah, of course.
Guys, if you go to our lives, if you see this weekend, all those flags, we did Trans is Beautiful episodes. We did 3 of them. One's with Lena. You see the one with Stephanie Helm. So, yeah, but please go check that out. And there's one with Lena, too. So go check those out. That'll definitely help you guys get some perspective on all of this. And just wanted to point out those videos. Thanks, Neil.
Also, Caterpillar, what was the question? Just type it in. You don't have to super chat. I just wanted to. I don't want to leave anybody out.
She said to send you love for hosting this, I think.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Always good to see you in the chat. And yeah, and just wanted to let one last time tell everyone to go subscribe to Pocket Locker 86. And once again, once this live is ended, leave in the comments on the video what you thought and voice your opinion on this, what you like to see, what you liked about this, anything you wanted to add in this conversation.
I'll probably go live too for a bit.
I really want to get people's opinions on this. I'm genuinely interested to read what people think about this, and hopefully Dr. Bob would like to read that stuff too. And yeah, that's pretty much.
I'll go live a few minutes after you get off.
All right, I'll definitely be in the chat watching that.
Nice.
You have just.
I should just add, Jay, I'm not familiar with you and
know.
your work. I just got to say how impressed I am with you.
Oh, I appreciate that, Dr. Bob. Can I invite you on the hot program? It would be the big deal for me and my co-host to have you on.
Oh, I'd love it. Thank you.
All right, so I'll probably shoot you an email.
Wow.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over you.